Is it filming here?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. So, hi Tom.
Hello, welcome to America. If this is America, I don't know.
Yeah, this is.
We're actually not going to be part of America pretty soon, because there's a disaster on our doorstep.
Oh, yeah?
We're slip sliding away, just like the song.
So where are we right now?
You're on what they call the Prairie Terrace. This was, it's called Luce, which is found only in very certain parts of the country. What it is, it's a particulate that was blown over here from the western prairies at the end of the, or during the last ice age, when most of the moisture on the planet was locked up in ice caps, which extended far south in the United States, as far south as Chicago. The ice was a mile thick. Think of that. A mile thick of ice. All that was locked up, the moisture. So it was very dry and cold. And the winds blew this dry, red particulate dust, basically, off of the western prairies. And it's like ripples on a beach in the sand. The whole contour, the topography of the South, basically from maybe Tennessee on down, is a series of ripples left because of that. So it's such a good material that people make bricks from it. That was one of the first industries over here in Lacombe, was brick making, and most of the bricks went to New Orleans to build the French Quarter. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, so how long have you been interested in coastal Louisiana? And everything that is...
Since I first paddled the pirogue out and fell over, you know, and hit mucky bottom, and I realized that this was not the white sand beaches you see in TV ads and so forth, you know. This is a different type of coast. And that's what, unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize, is that it isn't part of the continental United States. Basically from right where we are now, south to the Gulf of Mexico, used to be the Gulf of Mexico. But when the ice started to melt, after the end of the last ice age, about 30,000 years ago, it accelerated more later on, but the water just started rushing down, and that's why you have this huge, over 14,000 miles of navigable waterway with the Ohio, the Missouri, you asked about watershed. That's the watershed for the center of the continent, is the Mississippi River. And all of that sediment comes down, and it is deposited in what became marsh. So as the river changed its course over thousands of years, it was kind of like a hose, you know, spraying sediment all along the coast. So that is not a stable foundation. It's not rock, it's not clay, it's organic sediment.
So what is the real coloration between the river and the sedimentation along the coast?
I'm not clear on your question.
What is the coloration, correlation between the river and the sedimentation over the coast, and if time changes, what are the consequences if, you know, natural processes do not happen anymore?
Very good question. You go right to the point of the problem. It's a disaster waiting to happen. It's a disaster on our doorstep. It's going to be catastrophic. In my opinion, it's a law of physics, the nature of hydrology. As the river deposited sediment, it was allowed to overflow its banks. Every spring when all the water was rushing down, it would overflow, and the heavier matter would settle out closer to the river. That's why you have natural levees. It's what the French Quarter in New Orleans is built on, natural levee. And so the plantations and all of the settlements were along the higher levees, along the higher ground along the river, because it settled out into the marshes and the swamps, the cypress swamps. So as each year, the annual flood would add to that. It would grow. So it's sediment layers, and they're not compacted like coal or other igneous type of rocks, or even limestone. It's still basically a muck. And I'm afraid that, of course, since we started really levying the river, there was no more sediment being deposited. There was no more living material. So if you want to kill something, just like I use an example of the capillaries in your hand, you've got veins, but then from the veins you've got all these hundreds of capillaries, and if you cut them off, the hand withers and dies. So if you want to kill a coastline, deprive it of sediment.
So in your opinion, is there a better future possible for Louisiana? And if so, what do we have to do?
And that is the unanswerable question. There's those that believe that there is nothing you can do. It is inevitable, because we're violating the laws of physics, and it ain't nice to fool with Mother Nature. And I think we should have learned that long ago, but we're going to learn it here, and we can see it now happening, and it can be. Human beings are adaptable. We're going to adapt to climate change. Whether those who believe in it or not are correct, or those who have scientific evidence demonstrating it are correct. Either way, we're going to be here. We only got one little planet, one little home that we all belong to. And if we keep slobbering it up and puking on it and crapping on it and making poop out of our living quarters, tons of toxic materials go into the air, that settles down. Where does it go? Into the watershed, come down the rivers, out into the streams, into the oceans, and the oceans turn acidic, and that kills the reefs. The Great Barrier Reefs are dying, and they supply our oxygen. Think about that. So, is there a future? Yeah, there has to be a future. How the future turns out is for us to determine.
So, why do you think people from America and around the world are not aware of what is going on here? In your opinion, what do you think? Because they don't care, or because it's a lack of interest, of information, maybe?
All of those.
They misunderstood what really is at stake?
Yeah, they're more concerned with how they're going to get enough ahead to save up for a house, or to pay the rent, or to buy the groceries, or to send the kids to college, or build a business, or whatever. That's their major concern. It's called survival, here and now. I'm talking about survival down the road. And I think if people are not aware, they will not care. And we see it as our job to make people aware. And that's why I'm doing the educational programs in environment. We have a program called Nature of Learning, where we bring students out into the marsh. We show them physically, dig down, get your fingers in there and smell it, experience it. People don't experience the marsh. They don't experience the swamp. We're disconnected. So out of sight, out of mind. And believe me, it will be out of sight for much longer. The only remaining cypress trees on the North Shore are in Mandeville, in a little strip of ground so now I could almost spit across it. It's the last ones. When Iberville came here in 1699, he remarked at the huge forest of enormous trees, and I've seen some of them after they were cut. They were 2,000 years old. Anyway, I counted rings up to 1,800, 1,800 years old. Pine trees, we had pine trees that were 800 years old. Oak trees over 1,000, maybe more. We still have a few left, but people don't care. Just because some oil company comes in and accidentally knocks a limb off an oak tree, you know, it's gone. What can you do about it? People feel helpless. And if you bitch about it, you know, they feel fearful. People fear the government.
So, most people from Louisiana are Republicans, right?
Oh, what?
Republicans.
Republican.
Yeah, they are not Democrats.
Oh, Republican.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, darling.
So, do you know this? Do you know how they foresee or how they can be interested in what is really going on in Louisiana, with all of what is happening with Donald Trump? You know what I mean? Can you explain to me why?
God can't explain Donald Trump.
Why are they?
Don't ask me to, dear. I mean, I got my opinion. You know.
Tell me about it. Why do you think they just, you know, they don't blink an eye about what is going on? They just don't care, and they support what Donald Trump is doing or what he's not doing.
Politics is always involved in everything. You know, people say, "Oh, that's politics." Well, of course it is. That's the nature of politics. Politics means people. That's what it's supposed to be, but it's taken on a dirty connotation. You know, politics. Now, to me, done right, politics can be the most noble profession to which a man or woman can aspire, because it's service.